Welcome. And as always, we'll start with a bracha, thanking God for the commandment to study Torah. And we're actually observing a commandment to do this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And we're going to look at the text here. If I can get it up. And here we are. In Deuteronomy, of course, the book of Dvarim. So I think we had not done this Rashi on verse 18, even though my marking is that we got to verse 19. So let me go back and quickly look at verse 18 with you in the text.
What
Here.
chapter?
Chapter 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Here we go. Va'atzaveh, and I commanded etchem, you, va'etahi, at that time, et kol hadvarim asher ta'asum, all the words, all the things which you need to do, which you should do. Et kol hadvarim asher ta'asum. So it says, o kol hadvarim, right? So because it says et kol hadvarim, right? It could have just said et asher ta'asun, that which you needed to do. So what again is the force of saying kol hadvarim? And he says, Rashi says, elu aseret hadvarim. This is interesting. These are the 10 things shebein dinei mamonot that distinguish civil cases. Literally, it means cases, judgments regarding finances. Mamon is money. Ledinei nefashot, from capital cases. In other words, this would be, of course, found in Tractate Sanhedrin. And actually, I thought what I would do is I would go to the Sifra, to Sepharia and the translation there, and then they cross-reference very easily to the Sanhedrin place and take a look at those 10 differences, because Rashi doesn't say here what they are. So I'm going to, let's see if I can do that. I'm going to stop this share and go to a different share. Okay, let me make sure I have the place for you. And here we are. Let's make sure. Sorry, I just want to find the right place here. Didn't have it right at the place. There we are. All right. So, and let me find the place. Okay. All right. Let's see if this will work. Oh, looks good. So here is the section in Sanhedrin, page 32a. And we'll just take a look at the English, just so that we can see what this is talking about. And in this chapter, it's talking about the difference, because Sanhedrin talks about how law is to be administered. So how courts are and the nature of these cases. So it says here, right, both cases of monetary law and cases of capital law are equal with regard to the requirement for inquiry and interrogation of witnesses. And it says, and this is based on Leviticus, which is saying you shall have one manner of law, meaning that all legal procedures must be uniform. Right. Okay, so here we go. Having stated the essential similarity between the two, the Mishnah enumerates the difference between them. What are the differences between cases of monetary law and cases of capital law? So keep account, right? Cases of monetary law are judged by a court of 3 judges, and cases of capital law are judged by a court of 23 judges. So that's 1. In cases of monetary law, the court opens the deliberations either with a claim to exempt the accused or with a claim to find him liable. And in cases of capital law, the court opens with deliberations with a claim to acquit the accused, but it does not open with deliberations with a claim to find him liable. So that's number 2, right? Cases of monetary law, court directs, that is, issues the ruling based on the majority of one judge, either to exempt or to find liable. But in cases of capital law, the court directs the judgment based on the majority of one judge to acquit and based on a majority of 2 judges to find liable. If only one, so they don't have this concept of of a hung jury, and it's not a jury, it's judges. These are the people who actually try the case and think it out. Sorry, I don't know why that happened. Try it again. So sorry. Are by people who are experts in the law and have studied it thoroughly, so that they have experience in this. But it has to be, if only one judge finds the accused liable, then if one judge is in the majority, so there are 23 judges, if 12 find 4 against him and 11 find to acquit him, they do not sentence him. They actually add to the court to make sure that if there is to be a liability, there are 2. So the only thing is that, right. So 12 have found him liable, and 1 has found him innocent. Okay. Are we on is that number 3 or number 4? Someone tell me. Keeping count? All right. In cases of monetary law, all those present at the trial may teach a reason to exempt a litigant or to find him liable. In cases of capital law, all those present at the trial may teach a reason to acquit the accused, but not all present may teach a reason to find him liable. Only the judges can teach a reason to find him liable. Now, we're not talking about witnesses here, but just to give you a little bit of background, when they would try these cases, they would do it in front of a group of students. And if anyone in the group of students had reasons to find him liable, in a case of a capital case, they would not be able to say anything. Only the judges themselves of the 23. On the other hand, if someone in that group, if a student saw a reason to acquit, he could stand up and mention it. Okay. And maybe this is the number here, right? In cases of monetary law, one who initially teaches a reason to find the accused liable may then teach a reason to exempt him. And one who initially teaches a reason to exempt him may then teach a reason to find him liable, right, in these deliberations. In cases of capital law, one who initially teaches a reason to find him liable may then teach a reason to acquit, but one who initially teaches a reason to acquit may not return and teach a reason to find him liable. You can see the safeguards that are involved in the actual execution of capital cases. They do practice capital punishment, but they do everything they can within the body of the law to actually prevent that from ever happening, because we know you can never go back, right? Number 7, in cases of monetary law, the court judges during the daytime, judges verb, right, and may conclude the deliberations and issue the ruling even at night. In cases of, and they translate this as monetary law. When I think of civil cases, I think of that as between 2 people, but here we are also talking about cases where fines would be exacted, etc. So it still might not be a civil case in the way I believe we understand it. When it says monetary, it has to do strictly with the fact that money is involved in the adjudication of the case, right? Does A owe B? Does A owe a fine? Etc., etc. In cases of capital law, the court judges during the daytime and concludes the deliberations and issues the ruling only in the daytime. Okay, so they cannot, if they come, they can't continue the discussions of their deliberations at night. They have to give themselves the night in which to take a break, reflect, etc. Number 8, in cases of monetary law, the court may conclude the deliberations and issue the ruling even on that same day, whether to exempt the accused or find him liable. In cases of capital law, the court may conclude the deliberations and issue the rulings even on the same day to acquit the accused, but must wait until the following day to find him liable. It's called halanat hadin in Hebrew. Therefore, since capital cases might continue for 2 days, the court does not judge cases of capital law on certain days, neither on the eve of Shabbat, nor the eve of a festival. Number 9, in cases of monetary law and likewise in the cases of ritual impurity and purity, the judges commence expressing their opinions from the greatest of the judges. In cases of capital law, the judges commence issuing their opinions from the side where the least significant judges sit. So in the case of capital law, we don't want to do, there's such consideration given to process that you can see and how process might affect the outcome and the deliberations, that if they were to start with the senior judges in a capital case, it might cause someone who has a legitimate issue out of modesty or fear of being shamed and humiliated from saying anything. And that's why in a capital case, they don't start with the senior judges. And the last one, all are fit to judge cases of monetary law, but not all are fit to judge cases of capital law. Only priests, Levites, and Israelites who are of sufficiently fit lineage to marry their daughters to members of the priesthood are fit to judge cases of capital law. An interesting statement. Okay, so there we have it.
Wait,
So
I want to clarify that last statement.
Yes,
Can you go back to that? Can you go back to that sentence?
Yes.
So does that mean priest? When it says the sufficient fit lineage, that's just Israelites.
Yeah, it could be a priest. If a priest were to marry a divorcee, for example, or then in that case, their child would not be able to marry their daughter would not be able to marry a member of the priesthood.
Yeah, so my point is the sentence is not clear whether it's priests, Levites, and Israelites who, or whether it's priests, Levites, and Israelites who.
No, it's all three. It is all three.
Okay.
They're all considerations. So, for example, if a Levite or an Israelite were to, commit incest, the child would, unfortunately not be able to marry into the priesthood. And they themselves, of course, would be rendered unfit. Of course, there's a chance that it becomes much more complicated because, those are capital cases, incidentally. I believe. That case, I believe. So, but there are other things that they might do that would render them unfit. And again, maybe it's much more benign, meaning that you have to be able to declare your lineage. You need to know what your lineage is. That's all it really means. It may mean a far more benign thing. So again, you're limiting, but again, the idea, of course, is that you're limiting the number of people who are going to be able to actually judge cases of capital law. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to come out of, I thought it was worth taking the time to just go over that with you. My sense is to show how much thought goes into the actual process of this. Okay, so I'm going to stop that and go to a new share. Okay, let's go see if I can find it. Oh, all right. And we'll go back to our original Torah T'mima text. All right. There's just, it's an ocean. It is absolutely an ocean. And just like with the ocean, you never get to the bottom of it. You never explore the entire ocean. There's just an ocean of Torah out there. And you can go deeper and deeper if you want. And then there's also just the square miles of it. Okay. Here's where we stopped in the text itself. Vanisa, and we journeyed, mechorev, from Chorev. Chorev is what we call Mount Sinai. You may be familiar with that in Deuteronomy. This is, of course, the second time that we're going through Deuteronomy together. So we journeyed from Chorev, v'nelech et kol hamidbar hagadol, and we went through the entire great wilderness, v'hanora, the terrible, hahu, another terrifying, hahu, that, asher reitem, which you saw, derech har ha'emori, it was by way of the mount of the Amorites, the mountain of the Amorites, ka'asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu utanu, just as the Lord our God had commanded us, v'navo ad Kadesh Barnea, and we arrived at Kadesh Barnea. This is not the 40 years. This is the speed with which they got to the point where they could have entered the land of Canaan, right? Va'omar aleichem. Let's just make sure. Let's see if we've got some Rashis to take care of. Hamidbar hagadol v'hanora, right? The great and awesome wilderness. Shehayubo, and what do we mean? Rashi, again, as he does on many occasions, tries to put some specifications to general statements. And he says, Shehayubo, because in this wilderness there were nechashim kakorot, snakes that were like beams, right, like rafters, va'akravim, and scorpions kakashtot, like bows, right? They were huge animals, insects. So onwards, and the next one is going to be kafbet. So we have a couple of verses straightforward. Va'omar aleichem, and I said to you, Batem ad har ha'emori, you have arrived at the mount of the Amorites. And remember, the kings that went out to attack them were Amorite kings. Sichon was an Amorite king, and Og, I believe, was also an Amorite king. So just to mention, right, they of course, at this point, they had not engaged with them. Asher Adonai Eloheinu noten lanu, which the Lord our God is giving to us. Re'eh, see, Natan Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God has given lefanecha, before you, et haaretz, the land. Excuse me 1 second. Getting there. Okay. Ale, go up. Reish, inherit. Ka'asher diber Hashem Elokei Abotecha, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, spoke to you. L'chlach, al tira, do not fear. For al techat, and do not be dismayed. Have the courage to do this, right?
So I looked it up. Og was king of Bashan.
Right, but that Bashan may have been a city in.
May have been related to Amorite.
Right, but Sichon is expressly stated as Amorite. So it could be that Og is not an Amorite king. He simply was a powerful king, and Bashan had to be there, I'm assuming, at the time, that Bashan was a city there. So he's referenced, by the way, also, believe it or not, back in Genesis, not by name, but by tradition, because it says when these kings, remember the 5 kings and the 4 kings, and when the 4 kings, I think, carried off Lot, who was encamped outside of, or in Sodom, and he got carried off. It says the Plata, the remnant, came and told Abraham. That remnant is understood as meaning Og, as referring to Og, and he is around for a long, long time. And I'm not sure if he's considered to be one of the Rephaim. So just all these details to remember, right? Okay. Onwards. Vatikrevun Elai Kulchem. and all of you gathered around me. You gathered to me, Vatomru, and you said, Nishlacha anashim, let us send men lefanenu, before us, vayachparu lanu et haaretz, and they should spy out the land, vayashivu otanu davar, and they should bring back to us word, et haderech, regarding the way asher na'aleba, that we should go up to the land, to it, right? The et ha'irim, and the cities, asher navo alehem, which we will come against them, or which we should come against them, as Rashi is going to explain. So let's take a look at the Rashi on this. Vatikravun elai kulchem, and you gathered to me, all of you, be'irbuvia, en masse. Ulahalan omer, but in another place, that is in Deuteronomy chapter 5, right? We're in Deuteronomy 1 here. It says, Vatikruvun elai kol rashi shiftechem, and you gathered to me all the chieftains of your tribes, the heads of your tribes, v'ziknechem, and your elders, vatomru hein haranu, and you said, behold, you have shown, or God has shown us, or we have been shown, etc. Ota, so Rashi says, what's the difference in the wording between these two situations where they gathered around Moses? Ota kriva, that particular gathering around him, haita hugenet, it was appropriate. Yeladim nechabdim et hazkenim, young people honored their elders. Ushalchun lifnehem, and they sent them before them. Uskenim mechabdim et harashim, and the elders showed honor to the chieftains. Lalechet lifnehem, that they should go before them. Aval kan, but in this particular case, vatikrevun elai kulchem, where it says, and you, all of you, gathered around me, came to me, be'irbuvia, in en masse, in a just, a mixed up collection. Yeladim dochafim et haskenim, the young people push aside the elders, was kenim dochafim et harashim, and the elders pushed aside the chieftains. Vayashivu, I believe it is, yeah. And they should, this is what they were saying. Yashivu otanu davar, they should bring back word to us. And Rashi, according to the Sifrei, interprets be'eze lashon heim medabrim. In other words, when it says davar here, right, it's talking about word. In other words, which language they speak. In other words, what language do the inhabitants speak? Et haderech, and this was the way, etc. In other words, that they should go in. And he comments, Rashi comments, ein derech she'ein ba akmimut. There is no way that doesn't involve a certain amount of doubling back, winding. It's not a straight path. It's going to have to involve going back and forth in order to get there. Ve'et ha'arim asher navo alehem, and those cities, how we should come to them. Tchila lichbosh, and he says what he's saying is what cities were weakest, so that they should, in other words, the low-hanging fruit in terms of the cities. Let's see here. We're almost out of time, and I'm thinking maybe we should stop here. The next little piece is really very good, and I'd rather save it for tomorrow. And God willing, we'll be able to look at it then. So I'll stop the share here. All right. Any thoughts or comments? All right. None being heard or entertained. I will.
Oh, I had one, but I was on mute.
Yes, go on.
The word Devarim is
Yeah.
kind of loaded because I saw a commentary at the very beginning of the Parsha where, it's the El HaDvarim,
Yes,
and there's a whole list of places where the people camped.
correct.
Each of the places is reminiscent of some sin that they committed.
Correct. It's not
And it's all there in the word Devarim.
right.
So anyway, I don't know how to connect that to what we just read, but the word Devarim is, a lot of times it's not a bland and neutral word.
Correct. So, okay. So you know that there is a word davar, which means cattle prod. And there's a beautiful interpretation of El Hadvarim. I think I shared it last time when we started the book. I had actually read this, I believe, in the Eitz Chaim, where there's a midrash, that the word Devarim is related to the word Devorah, which means a bee. And just as when a bee stings you, it then dies. Likewise, when Moses, because this is supposed to be a book of correction, of hochacha, of warning. And likewise, at the end of Moses' life, he stings the Jewish people, you might say, although he does it quite beautifully, and then he dies. So there's that connection as well. So in terms of the question you're asking, you're right. It doesn't seem to be any specific thing other than the fact that the word Varim has a heavier meaning than simply just a thing, right? Or even just a word. So I believe this drush is based on the fact that Dvarim is pleonastic. In other words, it could have been left out of the sentence for its simple meaning. And so the assumption always is in this kind of case that if it's in the sentence, there has to be an additional meaning. And this at least is what the Sifrei, I think, wants to suggest. So I'm going to stop the recording with this, but thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad you did. Thanks.